This video is about the 7 Years War in Europe. The war started in 1756 with the Prussian invasion of Saxony. 7 years later, the status quo ante bellum was restored. Important were Frederick II or Frederick the Great of Prussia, George II of Great Britain, also Prince of Brunswick-Lüneburg, better known as Hanover, Maria Theresa of Austria, and Louis XV of France. All European powers had territorial ambitions. The Prussians had their eyes on West Prussia and Saxony, whilst the Austrians wanted Silesia back from Prussia. Russian expansion was going to the west. As just mentioned, Austria wanted Silesia back. Silesia was an Austrian province, but lost during the Austrian War, or the War of the Austrian Succession, to Prussia. So you can imagine there's not much of a love lost between Prussia and Austria. Prussia just emerged as a great power, and of course it wanted to secure this position. Also, there was a massive colonial conflict going on between Great Britain and France, but this documentary is about the European theatre of the war. George II of Great Britain, as mentioned, was also Prince of Hanover, and Hanover, that was his ancestral land, his ancestral territory. He wanted to secure it. Now the two sides in the war. On one side we have Prussia, Great Britain, and quite a few smaller territories in the north. On the other side, the Treaty of Versailles, the allies were Austria, France, Saxony, Russia, and Sweden. As mentioned, the war started. The Prussian forces invaded Saxony and could take control over the country. An invasion of Bohemia failed, and French forces could take the Prussian territories in the west. Now, the French army, alongside the Imperial Army, moved east and was threatening Prussia from the Prussian point of view from the west. So troops were deployed and there was decisive Prussian victory. The Imperial Army was de facto taken out of the war for good. But not good for Prussia in the end. At the end of 1757, Austrian forces occupied large parts of Silesia. In the north, there were a few hostilities going on between the Swedes and the Prussians, but no decision. There's no decision. Now, the year 1758, the Russians occupied East Prussia, and Prussian offensive towards the Austrian heartland failed, but also an Austrian offensive towards Saxony failed. And we have the year 1759. Now, the Russians and Austrians effectively joined forces and decisively won the Battle of Kunersdorf. They could take control over Saxony, and now the war should be normally over and Prussia should be history. But for a reason not known, nobody could understand, Russians and Austrians withdrew. And Frederick the Great described this in a letter as the miracle of the House of Brandenburg. The French launched a few offensives, but were not really successful. During 1760, Prussia were at the brink of losing the war, but they could hold out. The Russians in the east, Austrians in the south, Swedish forces in the north, and the French in the west. As mentioned, they could hold out. The same happened in 1961. Prussia could hold out. The French were exhausted and there were near to none offensive operations going on. Then the Tsarina Elizabeth died and her successor, Peter III, admired Frederick the Great, and he took Russia out of the war. And now against solely Austria, Austrians are no match for the Prussians. Two decisive battles were won. The French were not successful in invading Hanover, and then there was the Treaty of Bertelsburg. Status quo ante bellum is restored. As mentioned, status quo ante bellum, main result, Prussia could defend the territory and now was definitely the fifth great power in Europe. But now it was clear that the German dualism between Prussia and Austria would grow and would be stronger. Substantial life of loss, especially on the Prussian side. France was financially wrecked, and that was a precondition for the French Revolution. And France lost. And the other theater lost her colonies, and there's a precondition that the French would go to support the British colonies and the United States of America against the Brits. That was the 7 Years' War in Europe in 5.